sports world, electricity is in the air. From New York City, it's a twin tower. Now he's back to show people why they call him the Myth. The reigning champion, Samir Bannout, returns to the flexing stage to defend his title. And Chris Dickerson, 1982 Mr. Olympia, reaches out once again in quest of the most coveted title in all of bodybuilding, Mr. Olympia.
Bodybuilding is that of Mr. Olympia. Now, even though this competition took place at the end of last year, it determined the 1985 Mr. Olympia. So let's go to the Felt Forum at Madison Square Garden.
Some of the most massive, sculpted, and highly developed bodies in the world. For 19 years, men like this have gathered to compete and compare for the ultimate title in bodybuilding, the Mr. Olympia. In those 19 years, an elite group of only 7 men have held the title. The first Mr. Olympia, Larry Scott. The man they call the Myth, Sergio Oliva, won this title 3 times. They love him here in New York City. The legendary Arnold Schwarzenegger won the Olympia 7 times. Franco Columbu won it in 1976, then 5 years later in 81. Frank Zane, 3-time Mr. Olympia, he'll join us today. Chris Dickerson, who won this title in London 2 years ago at the age of 43. And the defending champion, Samir Bannout. Will one more join that elite group? We'll know very soon. Welcome to the Felt Forum, Madison Square Garden in New York City for the 20th Mr. Olympia competition. It is a vocal and enthusiastic crowd here in New York City. Hello, everyone. I'm Bill McAtee, along with 3-time Mr. Olympia Frank Zane. And Frank, there is something almost electric about having the competition here in this city.
Bill, we have some of the greatest bodybuilding fans in the world here tonight, and I can well understand their excitement because we have 3 former Mr. Olympias returning to try to claim the title. We have Samir Bannout, last year's champ, Chris Dickerson, who won the title in 1982, and the return of the Myth, Sergio Oliva, who last won it in 1969, is here.
You mentioned Sergio Oliva, who probably best illustrates the fact that someone can excel at this sport well into their 40s.
And we have Albert Beckles at 53 years old. He's in the greatest shape of his life. And at the other end of the spectrum, Bob Paris, only 23 years old, also in great shape, and we expect big things from him today, too.
And if you've never seen a bodybuilding event, you're in for an interesting afternoon. On stage now, Sergio Oliva, 43 years old, a very interesting story. A weightlifter in Cuba, came to this country in the mid-60s. He is now a policeman in Chicago. As we said, they call him the Myth. Frank, what's the genesis for that nickname?
Bill, Sergio was unbelievable when he first won his title in 1967, and even today, 20 years later, he's still unbelievable.
All right, quickly, what are the judges looking for?
They're looking for the best combination of symmetry and proportion, as well as muscular size and definition.
All right, 20 years later, how does the Myth stack up?
Well, you know, he's been out of competition for some time, about 12 years, and he looks a little shaky to me. You notice when he's holding each pose, he's shaking. Maybe he's a little nervous.
Would it be nerves causing him to shake, or simply muscle tension?
Bill, to me, it looks like he hasn't practiced his posing enough, and the big question in my mind is, has Sergio's training and practice of posing kept pace with modern trends in bodybuilding, like choreography?
After 12 years away from the sport, one must wonder why Sergio Oliva felt the need to come back. Earlier, we asked him about it.
It is no age limit in bodybuilding. This is not a baseball. This is not a boxing. It is no limit. It all depends on how you feel and how well you train. Bodybuilding is the only sport you can train at 70, 80. It doesn't matter. Age don't mean nothing. As a matter of fact, you get better when you get older.
Well, you can judge that for yourself. Here's Sergio Oliva in 1966. He won the first of his 3 Mr. Olympia titles in 1967. And here he is now. His routine is over, and he's still out there. And Frank, the crowd here just loves him.
That's understandable, Bill. He won his titles here in New York City almost 20 years ago, and the fans still remember the Myth. They love him.
All right, we've just begun. Don't go away. We'll be back to the Felt Forum in Madison Square Garden in a moment. The first 2 rounds, which took place earlier today, are the compulsory rounds. There are 7 poses. Frank, why don't you take us through and tell us exactly what the judges are looking for?
Bill, the first thing the judges are looking for is symmetry and proportion. On the left, we see Sergio. We've already met him. Sergio is very symmetrical, balanced all over, very proportioned. On the right, Tom Platz, huge thighs, overdeveloped, not matching the rest of his body. His thighs are way out of proportion. Next, we have size. On the left, Lee Haney. On the right, Happy Steinbeck. Haney, much more muscular development than Steinbeck. Here we're not talking about size as height, we're talking about muscle size. Haney has it all over Steinbeck, as you can see. Next is definition, or degree of muscular separation. How well do the muscles stand out? Albert Beckles on the left, extraordinarily muscular. James Gobert on the right, not in very good condition for this competition. He's what we'd call smooth in bodybuilding. He's got fat on his body, not in very good shape.
And remember, Albert Beckles on the left is 53 years old. So after they pose individually, then come the comparative pose.
Thank you. Abdominals and thighs.
And they come up on stage in groups of 3. Now, Frank, you tell me there's a little bit of psyching going on here.
Yes, Bill, when a competitor doesn't get called out a lot for the comparisons, it definitely affects his stage presence, the way he acts on stage, and these guys want to look as confident as possible at all times when they're up there.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
And it's a little tense here because it's at the judge's discretion who gets called on stage.
Lee Haney.
Bill, it's the psyching and mind games that intimidate a lot of the competitors.
This is also the part of the competition where the crowd can become very much a subtle factor. Now, when you're on stage, Frank, are you playing to the judges or are you playing to the crowd?
Bill, I always posed for both judges and the audience.
Oh, we mentioned the psyching out process earlier. If you were on stage right now, how would you try to psych out the other competitors?
Well, since this is part of the competition where you're on stage with other competitors, what I did is I ignored my opponents completely and let them follow me. And this way, I came across as the winner.
Well, it must have worked. You won this title 3 times. Very much subjective judging in this sport. There are 7 judges. They rank the competitors from best to worst in each round. That was the end of the first round. Then came the second round. Relaxed posing.
Bill, they're sort of semi-relaxed. Their upper bodies are tense. The judges are looking for weak points or flaws in their development. When you're up there standing without posing, it's hard to hide your flaws.
And that brings us up to date. Now the third round, the posing round and on stage. Our defending champion from Lebanon, Samir Banout.
Bill, Banout looks in pretty good shape. He's put on some weight since last year. The question is, how will he stand up against the other top competitors?
Pose individually, then come the comparative pose.
Thank you. Abdominals and thighs.
And they come up on stage in groups of 3. Now, Frank, you tell me there's a little bit of psyching going on here.
Yes, Bill, when a competitor doesn't get called out a lot for the comparisons, it definitely affects his stage presence, the way he acts on stage, and these guys want to look as confident as possible at all times when they're up there.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
And it's a little tense here because it's at the judge's discretion who gets called on stage.
Lee Haney.
Bill, it's the psyching and mind games that intimidate a lot of the competitors.
This is also the part of the competition where the crowd can become very much a subtle factor. Now, when you're on stage, Frank, are you playing to the judges or are you playing to the crowd?
Bill, I always posed for both judges and the audience.
Oh, we mentioned the psyching out process earlier. If you were on stage right now, how would you try to psych out the other competitors?
Well, since this is part of the competition where you're on stage with other competitors, what I did is I ignored my opponents completely and let them follow me. And this way, I came across as the winner.
Well, it must have worked. You won this title 3 times. Very much subjective judging in this sport. There are 7 judges. They rank the competitors from best to worst in each round. That was the end of the first round. Then came the second round. Relaxed posing.
Bill, they're sort of semi-relaxed. Their upper bodies are tense. The judges are looking for weak points or flaws in their development. When you're up there standing without posing, it's hard to hide your flaws.
And
notice he has a little fat on the lower back, and I think it's going to affect him.
Samir Banout from Lebanon, our defending champion, and that's it for his routine. And working his way on stage now, dancing his way up the stairs, if you will, the amazing 53-year-old Albert Beckles. After years of training on a really tight schedule, Albert's developed a whole new training routine for this competition.
I find now by not having a fixed time, work much better. Because when I feel like training, I go, I train, I feel better, I can train longer, and at the end of my schedule, I feel really good. While as before, when I had a fixed time, you know, the time just turns up, I just drag myself to the gym, and I just struggle all the way through it.
Frank, I got to tell you that this guy looks like he's just having a great time out there.
He sure is. What amazes me is how he's continued to improve over the years. At 53, he's better than he was at 33 or 43, and he keeps getting better and better. Makes you wonder where it's all going to end. Pretty unique posing by Albert. I would call this disco posing. It's a much different style than all the other competitors. He shows his body to its fullest, though, and he's really into it. Enjoying every move, tensing every muscle at just exactly the right time.
We touched on this earlier. Why is Albert able to keep that body in such good shape after 53 years?
Bill, it's because he has his whole life organized. He knows exactly how much he needs to do to get into top shape. After all, it's not your age, it's your health. He's a prime example of someone in top health.
Does it surprise you that when he walks into a gym and doesn't feel like working out, perhaps he'll walk out?
Not at all. He knows what he has to do.
Albert Beckles, 53 years old. We've seen our oldest competitor. And coming up next, our youngest. A 23-year-old.
Very good. Shows a lot of charisma. This guy has a lot of potential for the future. If he continues to improve, I think he'll be one of the greatest of all time.
Bob Paris, and waiting in the wings, the man who won the Olympia 2 years ago in London, Chris Dickerson. He announced his retirement right after the competition. Now, 2 years later, Dickerson has returned, and he says he's training defensively.
It's a thoughtful workout. I don't push a lot of heavy weight because no one's going to ask me how much I bench press on stage. So that's the main thing I find changing. And I like training by myself without anybody yelling and saying, come on, lift the weight, because I feel I'm in my own body at this point. If I don't know what I'm doing now, I never will.
Frank, you saw him in London 2 years ago when he won. How has Chris changed?
Bill, one of Chris's strong points has always been his legs, and you can see they still look terrific, but I don't think his upper body is in as good a shape as when he won in London in 1982. He seems a little bit off form. He seems a little bit nervous and apprehensive to me, as he doesn't seem very sure of himself.
When you lay off for a year, do you lose a little bit of the fire to train?
Well, at first maybe, but I think the fire is still strong enough in Chris to make him want to make a comeback.
In that year, how does your body change?
Usually, Bill, you lose muscle size. It's possible to put fat on the body if you eat incorrectly and don't get enough other exercise. But a lot of people think that muscle turns to fat. This absolutely does not happen. If a person does get fat, it's because he doesn't get enough activity. Fat accumulates around the muscle.
Now, Chris doesn't use a lot of weight when he works out. Is that good or bad?
Well, I think it's detrimental for Chris. It'd be nice if he could train a little heavier. He'd be a little bit bigger, and he'd be able to compare himself more with some of the bigger guys in the competition today. To me, he looks like he needs more abdominal development. I've seen his weights looking better than this, and I don't think it's going to help him any.
Well, he certainly looks pleased with his performance today, and as Chris Dickerson moonwalks off the stage, up next, one of the stronger contestants here today, Joseph Wilkosch from Germany. Now, a good contrast here because Dickerson doesn't use a lot of weight when he trains. Wilkosch is a former Olympic weightlifter, and you can see a tremendous difference in the size of these two men.
Wilkosch is weighing 240 for this competition, and he's in the best shape of his career. He's got a lot of muscularity. There's Lou Ferrigno. By the way, Lou has never won the Mr. Olympia. I think he may be vying for that title in the future. Side tricep pose on Wilkosch, showing great mass. Now notice how thick his back is. This is from all the weightlifting.
All right, that naturally brings up the question from the judge's eye. Which is more important, being cut, which is the definition of the muscles, or mass?
They're both equally important, Bill. Wilkosch has it all together today. He has the size as well as the muscularity. Very dramatic music he's using, classical music. It fits his body very well. To me, he looks like a reincarnated Farney's Hercules.
And before those of you at home rush to your encyclopedias, we'll tell you that Farney's Hercules, of course, is a Greek statue.
And Bill, I think what we're seeing here today is moving sculpture. For me, bodybuilding has always been a form of sculpture.
And this knowledgeable bodybuilding crowd here at the Felt Forum in Madison Square Garden gives Wilkosch a big round of applause. All right, we're nearing the end of the posing routines, but still to come is a guy you like a lot, Lee Haney.
Yes, Bill, I think Haney's going to do very well because the judges seem very impressed with him in the preliminary rounds.
So Lee Haney awaits backstage, and we'll be back. Bill McAtee and Frank Zane back now at the Mr. Olympia contest in New York City and working his way on stage now. 25-year-old Lee Haney from South Carolina. That's his wife, Shirley. It's her birthday today. Lee actually didn't start out to be a bodybuilder. It happened when he found himself with a little extra time in the weight room.
I first started out playing football. I wanted to be a professional football player. During my junior year in high school, I had my left leg broken. I played only one game that year, so I was back in the weight room preparing for the next season. And after that next season did get started, which was my senior year, I received a break to my right leg. And there I was back again after only 4 games in the weight room again. So I said, listen, this is just not for me. And so I then decided to get into bodybuilding full time because I had spent 2 years in the weight room. So there wasn't any use to letting that go to waste.
And quite obviously, that time in the weight room didn't go to waste. Frank, he's really a nice man.
Lee Haney is one of the most humble and sincere bodybuilders I know. He not only has a great body, but he's a great person as well.
Earlier, we saw Joseph Wilkosch, a big man. Haney, like Wilkosch, is a big man.
He's even bigger, Bill. He weighs 242, and the thing about Haney is he's very symmetrical and proportionate. Everything matches. I'm amazed at the improvement he has made since last year. He's gotten bigger as well as more muscular. Notice his huge back. His posing has improved too. Notice that throughout his whole routine he smiles, makes him look confident and in control.
And you alluded to that confidence factor earlier, convincing the judges that you're the winner.
That's what it's all about. Nice routine.
Lee Haney and the crowd here at the Felt Forum in Madison Square Garden loudly voices its approval. Frank, you were pretty impressed with Lee Haney. Can anybody beat him in this competition?
Bill McCowie has a chance. I think it's close between McCowie and Haney right now, and McCowie is renowned for his posing. So we'll just wait and see what happens.
All right, let's take a look. Mohammed McCowie. Great contrast here between McCowie and Lee Haney.
McCowie is probably the smallest man in the contest. He's only 5'1". I think he weighs about 160 pounds. But what he lacks in size, he makes up for in his posing presentation.
Tell us how he does that, because McCowie is a foot shorter.
a foot shorter than Lee Haney.
Bill McCowie is a master at distraction. He is able, through his sensational posing, to hide his weak points. And his weak points are evident on the back part of his body. His back is not quite as developed as the rest of him, and neither are his hamstrings, his leg biceps. Notice the great smile, the great hand movements.
So part of the strategy is to take the judges away from what you know are your weaknesses.
Right. If they never notice the weak, there you can see his leg biceps, not too well developed. If they never notice the weak points, naturally they're not going to mark you down. Good moves. Beautiful. Great arm development as well. Abdominal development is also pretty sensational.
Grandiose music. Muhammad obviously has a flair for the dramatic. You said a bit earlier that he had a shot. You've seen his performance. What do you think?
Great performance, Phil, and he just might do it. It all depends on how much the judges put into the performance, whether they value the prior rounds on size and muscularity more.
We'll see in a moment. We'll be back. Back now at the Mr. Olympia contest, where we've completed 3 rounds. The judges have narrowed it down to the final 6. From right to left, Samir Bannout, Albert Beckles, Joseph Wilkoch, Roy Callender, Lee Haney, and little Muhammad McCowie. And that leaves us with one more round.
One final thing. Let's pose down. Go.
Now, Frank, this is popular with the audience, the pose down, the 4th round. But how much does this count in the judging?
Bill, it's the final chance the judges have to change their minds about the scoring. In the past, it has counted a lot. When I won my last Mr. Olympia title in '79, it was in the pose down that I did win it.
Sometimes this can get a little rowdy as the competitors battle for position, even leaping off the stage at times.
The idea is to attract as much attention to yourself as possible, and there's several ways to do that. One is to have a very dramatic routine and moves. There we see Beckles changing his position, moving around. There's Roy Callender hitting the front lat shot. Oh, arm gets in the way. He's jockeying for the best position. Lee Haney looking confident as ever, smiling. Beckles hitting the most muscular shot. McCowie matching his most muscular pose. Beckles looks a little winded there. It's been a long day for him.
Okay, fellas, thank you. File off, please.
And that wraps up the final round of competition. The judges will do their final calculations now. And while they do that, we want to show you what happened a little bit earlier in the saga of Sergio Oliva. Sergio finished in 8th place. And as you look at the judges, we'll tell you it was not a popular decision here.
The audience is obviously disappointed. They wanted to see Sergio make a successful comeback. He's very well liked here. This is where he won all 3 of his Mr. Olympia titles.
That's his wife, Arlene, with their baby.
Bill, I've seen a lot of bodybuilding competitions, but I've never witnessed a scene like this before.
Bodybuilding fans are generally an emotional group, but you seldom see a competitor react like this. Sergio certainly is seizing the moment.
Give the support to the best man. The place that I took tonight, it doesn't matter 8, 9, 1, 17, 20, no matter what, I will be forever the myth.
Sergio will always be #1 in the hearts of his fans, and I hope he continues to compete. He's a great, great champion.
And the baby certainly remained calm through all of that. Well, while we're away, the defending champion was dethroned. 6th place goes to Samir Bannout. And in 5th place, a bit of a surprise from Barbados, Roy Callender.
Not a bad showing after a 3-year layoff, Bill.
In the #4 position, the old man, 53-year-old Albert Beckles.
I thought he should have placed a little higher, Bill. He was in great shape.
And now they're going to announce the 3rd spot.
Number 14, Joseph Wilkoch.
Now that comes as a slight surprise to me. I had Wilkoch for 2nd. I thought he was in amazing condition today.
And now we're down to 2. On the left, Muhammad McCowie. On the right, Lee Haney.
Receiving a silver medal, the 2nd place winner, the magical Egyptian, Muhammad McCowie.
And the smile on Lee Haney's face tells the story. Lee Haney has won it. He becomes only the 8th man to hold the title of Mr. Olympia. And Frank, you had Haney as the favorite after the preliminary.
Bill, it was obvious to me that Haney should win this contest. He had it all. And I think he's going to be a contending force in the sport for a long time to come.
And he's also $50,000 richer. Not a bad birthday present for wife Shirley. So the sport of bodybuilding has a new star in the person of unassuming Lee Haney. And as you look at the new Mr. Olympia, for Frank Zane, I'm Bill McAtee. Good afternoon from Madison Square Garden in New York City.